This video lecture is about the foundation of argument. Argument basics. In They Say, I Say, the authors talk about making an argument. What they say is to make an argument clear, the thesis and the larger conversation the thesis is responding to. When they talk about the conversation, what they mean is the two different sides that are involved in the debate. We have one side arguing point A, and then we have another side arguing point B, and what they say to each other and how they respond to each other create that conversation. The authors of They Say, I Say talk about making the conversation clear early on in the argument. What you should do is start with what others are saying, and then introduce your own ideas as a response to those ideas. What you need to do throughout a paper is to return to the motivating they say throughout your argument to remind readers what you are responding to. We need to keep in mind that in the real world, we don't make arguments without being provoked. We make arguments because someone has said or done something, or perhaps not said or done something, and we need to respond. What we're going to do through our argumentative essay is to respond to a side that we do or do not agree with. When we're talking about the basics of argument, we're going to talk about four different terms: the claim, the reasons, the evidence, and the opposing argument. A claim is an arguable position. In a piece of writing, whether it's an editorial, a research paper, or an essay, the claim is the position that the writer is taking. In your essay, your claim will be communicated through your thesis statement. In Don't Blame the Eater, David Zinczenko claims that the link between obesity and eating fast food is not the fault of the eater. Instead, he argues that the fast food companies are at fault. At the end of the piece, he adds to that claim by stating that fast food companies would be smart to disclose the nutritional information for their food. Now, do keep in mind that this piece was written in the early 2000s, before fast food companies were required to disclose the nutritional information and content of their food. We are looking at this as an example because Zinczenko builds a solid argument. He addresses the fact that there is a conversation happening about this topic, about who should be blamed for the link between obesity and fast food, and then he talks about his claim and supports that claim with reasons and evidence. So that takes us to our second term. The reasons back up the author's claim. They illustrate why the reader should buy or believe the author's claim. And then the evidence supports those reasons. So evidence can come in a variety of forms, as facts, statistics, anecdotes, case studies, expert testimonials, and personal experience, just to name a few. Zinczenko provides plenty of evidence throughout his piece, including evidence from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, from the National Institutes of Health, and from a fast food restaurant's website. The information from these sources supports his side of the debate, that the fast food restaurants are at fault, and he names his sources so that we know where that information is coming from. The opposing argument or counterclaim is the other side of the debate. If you are a writer, this is the person who would be writing a response to argue against your claim. For Zinczenko, the opposing side is the side that says the people eating the food are at fault. He acknowledges the opposing side and responds to his opposition almost immediately in his piece. In the first paragraph, Zinczenko opens by saying, "If ever there were a newspaper headline custom made for Jay Leno's monologue, this was it. Kids taking on McDonald's this week, suing the company for making them fat. Isn't that like middle-aged men suing Porsche for making them get speeding tickets? Whatever happened to personal responsibility?" So he asks these questions in the first paragraph, but what we can tell very quickly is that this is not the side that he agrees with. Almost immediately, in that second paragraph, he says, "I tend to sympathize with these portly fast food patrons, though. Maybe that's because I used to be one of them." So from the very beginning of his arguments, Zinczenko establishes that there is another side, the side that he's disagreeing with, and then he makes it clear in his second paragraph that he disagrees and starts to explain why. Later in the argument, Zinczenko returns to the opposing side again and says, "Shouldn't we know better than to eat 2 meals a day in fast food restaurants?" That's one argument. So again, he's stating exactly what the opposing side is arguing. He's saying, this is what people are asking, but this is not actually what I agree with. He goes on to say, but where exactly are consumers, particularly teenagers, supposed to find alternatives? So what we're seeing Zinczenko do there is establish the conversation. He's saying, I understand there's another side. here's what this side is saying, and then he's responding to that and providing more evidence to support his side of the debate. So now that we have discussed a claim, reasons, evidence, and the opposing side, we will talk about appeals. To make the reader buy your argument or to agree with you, you can appeal to them in several different ways. We have ethos, pathos, and logos. The first one, ethos, means ethical appeals. When we talk about ethical appeals, we aren't talking about ethics in the sense of right from wrong. What we're talking about is the author establishing credibility. Now, credibility means that I can trust what the author says. So the author has to show me through his or her writing that I can trust what they're writing, and so I'm more likely to agree with them and side with their opinion. An author can establish ethos in several different ways. An author can establish ethos by including information about his or her personal experience, his or her professional experience, by acknowledging both sides of the debate and proving that he or she is being fair, and by also supporting his or her points with information from research. When the author includes information from research, we can tell that that writer has done his or her homework. We know that they are not just basing their argument on opinion alone. With pathos, the authors are appealing to us emotionally. So they're trying to manipulate our emotions on purpose to get us emotionally involved in the argument. We also have logos, which are logical appeals. Logical appeals usually take the form of facts and statistics. Facts and statistics are pieces of information that can be fact-checked, but as long as the facts check out, they really can't be argued with. So let's talk about some examples. This is a pretty basic example, but if I went to my boss and said, I should get a raise, there are 3 different ways that I could appeal to my boss. The first would be through ethos. I have worked for this company for 10 years and I recently earned my master's in finance. Now I'm showing that I've put my time in at the company and that I'm qualified to do my job. I have a degree. Then there's pathos. I have 4 starving children and a wife to feed. That would be appealing to my boss emotionally. I'm trying to get them emotionally invested in my situation. And then finally, there's logos. My sales plan increased our profit by 15% last year. There you can see the statistic. Now, when you look at those 3, the one that is usually most convincing for readers is logos. My sales plan increased our profit by 15% last year. For ethos, just because I have a master's in finance does not necessarily mean that I'm good at my job. And for pathos, my boss probably isn't interested in my emotional reason for why I need to have a raise. However, when I use logos and show that I'm actually doing something good for the company, something measurable, my boss is going to be much more convinced that I deserve a raise. So let's look at Don't Blame the Eater and see how David Zinczenko uses ethos, pathos, and logos to develop his argument. We see Zinczenko using ethos by mentioning his personal experience. He mentions towards the beginning of his argument that he was a typical mid-1980s latchkey kid. And he talks about that personal experience because he was one of those teenagers who was eating that fast food. He ate McDonald's, Taco Bell, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Pizza Hut. He talks about how he gained 212 pounds by the age of 15. And then he mentions that he got lucky, how he went to college, joined the Navy Reserves, and got involved with a health magazine. He makes the point that he learned how to manage his diet, but that many of the teenagers who live as he lived at one point on a fast food diet won't turn their lives around. They start eating this fast food when they are young, and they continue to eat that unhealthy food throughout their lives. So he's including that personal experience to show that he does have experience with the topic that he's writing about. He doesn't mention his professional experience directly in the article. However, if we look at the bottom of the page, on page 241, they do have a little blurb about the author. It says, David Zinczenko, who was for many years the editor-in-chief of the fitness magazine Men's Health, is president of Galvanized Brands, a global health and wellness media company. This piece was first published on the op-ed page of the New York Times. So here we have a mention of personal experience. He was the editor-in-chief of a fitness magazine, directly dealing with the topic that he's writing about, which is health. And then he's also the president of the global health and wellness media company. So we can see that he actually has professional experience about these topics that he's writing about health. In addition to his professional experience and personal experience, David Zinczenko does acknowledge both sides of the argument. So he acknowledges that there are points that people are making that don't agree with his point, and he acknowledges those points. So that's showing us that he's being fair. And finally, he uses information from research. So he pulls in that evidence that we talked about earlier from the National Institutes of Health, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as well as from the fast food website. So we can tell that Zinczenko has done his homework. He's researched, he understands the topic, he's using information that can be fact-checked, so we can really trust what he's saying. The second piece is pathos. Now, we don't have a lot of emotion in this argument, but we do have a little bit. When he mentions his personal experience, that is establishing ethos, but we could also say that it's establishing pathos. He says he sympathizes with the portly fast food patrons, and he's mentioning his personal experience to get us to sympathize with them as well. So he's pulling us in emotionally, making us feel bad for the eaters of this fast food, and then he continues that emotion throughout the article. Not overly emotional, but he does make us think about the people who are eating it and tries to get our sympathy. And then finally, there's logos. So logos shows up in the form of facts and statistics. He mentions that type 2 diabetes accounts for at least 30% of all new childhood cases of diabetes in this country. He mentions that diabetes accounted for $2.6 billion in healthcare costs in 1969, but that today's number is an unbelievable $100 billion a year. He mentions that there are 13,000 McDonald's restaurants in America, and that was in 2002. And then he goes on to talk about the information on the fast food company's website about the chicken salad. It first seems to only contain 150 calories, but when he adds up all the calories that are really in that salad, it totals to be over 1,040 calories. So David Zinczenko is bringing in those facts and those statistics that can be fact-checked, but they really can't be argued against. So let's talk about argument basics in essay writing, because you are going to be writing an argumentative essay. So you are going to, in your essay, write an introduction. In that introduction, you're going to establish background information. Now, that background information should establish the conversation. What is the topic? And then what is each side of the debate arguing? So you want to acknowledge what the people on your side are arguing, but you also want to acknowledge what the people on the opposition are arguing as well. And then we need your thesis statement. So your thesis statement will come at the end of your introduction, and in your thesis statement you will state your claim, so exactly what your argument is. Then we have the body paragraphs. Each body paragraph will have a topic sentence that establishes exactly what that paragraph will be about. It will include evidence from articles, so you will pull in direct quotes or paraphrase details, as well as your ideas. So what you want to make sure that you do in an argument is you don't let the evidence speak for you. You put in evidence, but then you use that evidence to develop your ideas and maintain a balance. Now, in your essay, most of your body paragraphs are going to be about your side. They're going to outline your reasons and then support those reasons with evidence from the articles as well as your ideas. But you do want to have at least one body paragraph that acknowledges the opposing side. So what the opposing side is saying, pull in some evidence from the articles from the opposition, and then respond to those ideas and show why your argument is ultimately stronger. Finally, there's the conclusion. Now, because we're in a more advanced writing class, what I would like for you to do is to avoid just summarizing your argument in the conclusion. We're going to try to be a little bit more advanced in our writing. Your reader has just read through your entire essay. They've stuck with you, they've heard you out, they know exactly what points you're making. When they get to your conclusion, the last thing they want to do is just sit through your essay again in shorter form. So I would like for you to avoid summarizing. Instead, sum up your ideas and leave the reader with a strong, lasting thought. You want them to walk away from your essay really thinking about what you just said. So try to leave them with that strong, lasting thought that will ultimately convince them to take your side. So these are argumentative basics in essay writing. And on D2L, you will find information that shows you how to develop your thesis statement, how to develop your body paragraphs, how to integrate quotes smoothly from articles for support, how to put together your conclusion, and guidelines and the rubric for your paper. So make sure you check out all of those resources that are available to you and email me with any questions or concerns that you might have about this essay.